Cash-a-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to GeoGearHeads episode 251. I'm Daryl W4, back again with Chris of the Northwest. Don't call him the bad cop. He's now Chris of the Northwest.
I've given up my bad habits. I have all new habits.
You have all new bad habits that are going to be known as Chris of the Northwest.
You know, there's still elements of the bad cop within me.
Those kind of elements never leave.
No.
So it's just kind of that, lipstick on a pig kind of thing.
I don't like where this is going.
All right. Well, we have with us tonight our one of our favorite guests is Limax.
Good evening, everyone.
And thanks for joining us for another discussion about picking your GPSRs. We talked about this last on GeoGearHeads 199, which is a little over a year ago. Actually, it's almost exactly a year ago.
Just in time for Christmas.
Just in time for Christmas, and in pretty much as a response to an email that we received from Hudson family. So, Chris, do you want to read that?
I would love to. They write in their email, "Thanks for doing a show on smartphone versus GPSR. Our family has been caching for about a year with 50 plus finds. My 10-year-old is really into it, and it is something we enjoy doing together. We use the iPhone, but I love gadgets, and I've been debating about a GPSR. Your show convinced me that I need to make the purchase, but I'm struggling on which one to get. Can you guide me between the Garmin 64S and the Oregon 700 series? I like the touchscreen aspect of the 700 or the 750, but it sounds like the live GC feature isn't all that great. I should save the money, or should I save the money and go for the 64S? Or is the 700, 750 a must-have? This would be my first GPSR," he says at the end.
Well, and of course, I already replied to him and gave him my 2 cents on it. But we'll talk a lot more about that later. But he's already narrowed it down to 2 units, basically. And I don't know that that's necessarily the right choice. But, that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
Well, and, it's very possible he went into a big box store and those were the 2 they had on the shelf.
Absolutely. But those are the 2 that people seem to be talking about, especially at that point. If you're looking for a new GPSR, those were the 2 that everyone was talking about. You had the 64, that's the really high performance outdoor unit. And then you had the new hotness, which was the Oregon 700.
Hotness or hot mess?
It's a little bit of both. Actually, I've seen much worse releases from Garmin. So
yes,
I was pretty impressed.
The Rhino wasn't mentioned.
No, the Rhino was not mentioned, which doesn't surprise me.
No.
And I don't think we're going to mention that one tonight.
Oh, maybe I should then.
It got mentioned, though, didn't it?
It did, but not as a pick. Not as a pick.
No.
But we also got a notice or note rather on Google Plus from Team Aviju about what he's going to need to actually make a new GPSR purchase.
He says, my next GPSR will be able to talk directly to my iPhone over an open protocol because it's 2016 and I'm sick of entering waypoints manually, not being able to buy a new one until this. I'm not going to buy a new one until this is possible. So he probably won't have one for, the near future.
I was going to say, does anyone on the panel think that Garmin is going to implement an open protocol?
No.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately,
it's not
going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, it's not in their benefit to do so.
I'm trying to remember, though, back in the old days when the Garmin's used to be able to put out NMEA. You could use that then, of course, to get, to put it onto CacheMate on the Palm Pilot, couldn't we?
You could read the location, but I don't think you could send waypoints.
Oh, probably not. Yeah.
And that's because that protocol, if I remember, was just the protocol for receiving the data. And I think I don't know for sure, but I think that the Bluetooth units, that being like the 64S and the new Oregon 700 series, I believe those will actually send location over Bluetooth. So you can use it as that GPS for something like your tablet.
It sends location to your tablet, not the other way around.
Correct.
But, I'm not opposed to having an app on my phone that talks to my GPSR. So that removes the open protocol connection or the open protocol designation he was looking for. If it's a proprietary app talking to a proprietary GPS, that's fine. If I can grab something, cut and paste it, put it into the app, and it sends it off to the GPSR, I'm okay with that.
Well, you're halfway there with the Oregon 700 in that it does have a proprietary app to talk with the GPS. However, you can't paste anything into it. And what really drives me nuts, there's no interface on that app for the logs or for sending anything to the unit. So you have to do everything with your geocaching from the unit itself. And then it just uses the app as the conduit to talk over Bluetooth through your phone to geocaching.com.
Okay.
I want something in between.
I'm just thinking of a workaround here in my head. Shoot it down. You go onto geocaching.com, you put in corrected coordinates. Then you have your GPSR go get that cache. Will it have or that cache listing? Will it have those corrected coordinates?
I'm pretty sure it does. I haven't played with that enough to make sure, but I want to say in my testing that I've done with the unit, when I download the list, the pocket queries, but when I download the list, it comes across with the corrected chords for the puzzles that I solved.
Okay. Now, that's nowhere near an open protocol.
No.
And
my big
nowhere
complaint,
near directly talking with a phone. But
right. And my big complaint with logging on the Oregon, the 700 series, is that when you post that log, it goes live. There's no option to save as a field note. There's no option to save to send later. So when you post it, it goes right out there, and you're dealing with that really, really lousy keyboard on the Oregon 700s.
Well, that's because you're using the live API, not the later API.
Yeah, exactly. But wouldn't you think there would be at least the option to toggle to save as a field note?
You should be able to, yes.
Yeah.
One would think, yeah.
I would love to have in that Garmin Connect app a listing of all of my saved logs that I could go back in and type and change. Wouldn't it be nice to even, if you couldn't do that, be able to post from the app your templates into the GPSR?
Yes.
So, there's a lot of stuff missing. And one of the big things is for someone who's looking at the immediacy for like a first to find, there's no way to send from like your email or from the website or from the geocaching app a particular cache to the unit. And that's one of the big things most of the people I've talked with are really looking for. They want that, I need to push this right now to this unit. And the only way to get units or to get the GPX into the GPS live right now is through the live API. So if I went to an event and had that GPX that was created for the event, I can't push it to the GPS in any way right now through Garmin Connect. I have to connect up, either put it on the card and pull the card out, put the card back in, or I need the USB cable to connect to something to download that file.
Yep. Do you see Team Mavaju in the or in the chat there? It says GPSR makers should have a chat with geocachers and geocache application developers to find out what their requests are.
I don't know that this is necessarily that they're deaf to these problems. I think a lot of it might be, and this is what I'm hoping, a lot of it might be it's just the first version.
And
We've
at
been
this point,
saying that for how long?
Well, but look how long it's taken to get from the Garmin Basecamp app and
Yeah.
the Oregon 600 series to get to the Garmin Connect app and the new Oregon 700s. It's taken about 2 years, I think, to get that far. So I think it's simply there's not enough people working on this. There's not enough resources to make this stuff happen in a more timely fashion. And that's probably due to a relatively small market.
At
My
the same
Max, you were
time,
going to say something.
yeah, I was going to say, I'm guessing that they've only talked with a small slice of people also. I mean, they were trying to keep this really hush-hush. So probably all they've really spoken to at this point is geocaching.com without getting feedback from a wider community.
Well, I
mean-
know they do have a panel that they work with internally, their own geocachers. But we all have seen what happens with these small panels. Is geocaching is a very diverse group. You're not going to get everyone satisfied with any of these products. So, I'm hoping for more. I don't necessarily expect more because I think they are working with a limited amount of resources. But we'll see what happens as these products develop, and that's why we have to keep coming back and doing these shows like every year or two, is to update you on what the current status is and what products are out there. But Limax, on Google Plus, you just replied that you were going to go back to using a map and compass.
Yeah, it just seems like that'd be so much easier than having to deal with all this technology at this point. A map and compass. I mean, okay, if suddenly the Earth's magnetic field goes out, you might be in trouble. But hopefully
there's bigger problems at that point.
Very true.
Well, let's get into the picks and why we're going to do this. So I'm going to start with mine because I'm the one who put mine in first. The categories that I come up with are really just three. It's the best for smartphone users, best for active outdoor users, and the best values. So for smartphone users, I'm thinking this is someone who's looking for that GPS to supplement their phone. It's not going to be necessarily their one and only, but they don't necessarily want to deal with a computer either. So for those kind of users, I think the Oregon 750 is a good solution. It's going to have, the 750 is going to have the camera, so it's something you could actually put the smartphone away while you're hiking, and if you want to grab some pictures, granted they're not great, but it's going to have some of the functions that you want from the smartphone so that you can leave that smartphone in your pocket when you're out in more hazardous conditions that you don't want to expose the smartphone. It's got the touchscreen that smartphone users expect and that live connection we were talking about. Now, the interesting thing is everyone's been focusing on the Bluetooth, but it does have Wi-Fi, so you don't even need to connect to the smartphone to go and download your Pocket Queries. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection, and I just did this before the show to make sure that it works and how it does it, you just go in there to the list, download that GPX, essentially, the Pocket Query, which they call lists, onto the phone. It takes an obscene amount of time to do it, but it does do the loading right over the Wi-Fi, so you don't need to connect to the smartphone. But in the field, you connect to the smartphone. You have the option to do the loading of the caches closest to you, just like you would with your phone if you're going to be doing that more impromptu caching. And it does do, as we mentioned, the logging from the phone or from the unit. So it is literally put the phone in your pocket, don't touch it while you're out caching, and you can still go caching. Is it a great solution? Not really. But for the people who are looking, the smartphone users who are used to all that kind of connection and looking for something that's a little bit more durable, a little bit more accurate, I've come around to think that the Oregon 750 is probably a good solution, even at the nearly $500, which is as much as your smartphone is.
Definitely. Would you say it's better to connect to your smartphone over Bluetooth or to put your smartphone into hotspot mode?
I think you're probably better off to do the Bluetooth because it takes less power. And that's not to say that you couldn't run around with like a mobile hotspot too.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think you're going to be draining the batteries on both devices, but it should perform a little bit better. And I haven't tried any of this stuff yet because I really haven't spent as much time with the 750 as I'd like. But I suspect that you could do the Wi-Fi to speed things up if you were concerned about the time issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the chat, Team Navajuice says Bluetooth is better. The Wi-Fi AP is too much of a hassle.
I would agree. I would agree. But the other thing that I came up with, in each of these, I have two options because I don't think there is any one good solution. And you'll note, too, that all of my picks are Garmin. We'll get into that in a little while, too. But the eTrex 30X, I really like that one. One of the reasons is that it's a very small but powerful unit with the buttons, so you don't have to worry about it getting wet or working with gloves on it. These touchscreen units, the capacitive touchscreens from Garmin, are really bad in like the rain even, and they're even worse in the water. They just do all kinds of weird presses because it thinks the water is your finger, which is a problem with any capacitive touchscreen. This is not isolated to the Garmin units. So I really am not a fan of touchscreens, and I do hope that they're going to come out with like the GPS Map 66 that's going to bring in the functions that we saw with the Oregon 700 series to connect to the smartphone and download the caches. But at this point, that's the only unit. When they come out with that next unit, I'll probably change my selection from the eTrex to whatever. But right now, I like that small size of the eTrex 30X actually. I have the 30, not the 30X, but the X is supposed to be a lot better from everything I've seen and heard. And I was really impressed with the 30, so I can wholeheartedly recommend the 30X. At $300, it's not cheap. You can get the 64s, but I like that size, especially if you're carrying around both devices like I tend to do. I'll have the GPS in one hand, the smartphone in the other. And if you're doing that, I like having that smaller device, and the 30X is one of the few units that I can really use one-handed. Now, the next one that I'm going to talk about are the active outdoor users. So these are the guys who are out there, they're doing the hiking. They don't really care about the smartphone. They'll probably still have one, but they're looking for something that's going to be their sole device. This is not an add-on. This is their unit.
Mm-hmm.
And for those active outdoor users, I don't think there's a better unit out there right now than the 64 ST. And it's only $350. But this one, and really it only works if you're in the US or Canada, and you have to buy the one for the US or Canada because it does have the topo maps built in. Now, you could always grab a 64 and load a 64S and load the maps into it if you wanted to go that route. But I like the convenience, and it's not that much more expensive, and it gives you a little bit more RAM, or not RAM, but non-volatile to put those maps into. So getting that 64 ST with the topo maps loaded, it's a rugged unit, again, with a physical button. So it's going to work whether it gets wet, whether you're using gloves. So that's my top pick for the active outdoor users.
I do have to say the name always throws me off because it's 64 with a lowercase s and a lowercase t. It should be 64th, not 64th. So anyway,
ooh,
the
nitpicky.
TH. I want the 64 TH.
I'm sure the
Okay.
T stands for topo. What would the
Topo,
S
yes.
stand for?
Well, the S is the barometric altimeter and the electron or the
Sensors.
6-axis. Yeah, the
sensors,
6-axis
okay.
compass, whatever.
Yeah.
They're better compass. Yeah, I don't like the non-6-axis compass units, the ones that have the electronics, because it tends to mess up most users because they don't remember that it only changes the arrow's direction as they change, as they're moving. So if you stop moving, the only way it's going to change the arrow direction is if there's drift. So if you start spinning the unit, you're not going to be able to tell which direction it's actually stopped. And when you're stopped, and because of that drift, it's not going to point to the cache.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a feature I always want in a GPS, especially because most cachers seem to use the compass view to find the caches on the GPSR.
Right.
It's not like on the smartphones where most people seem to use the maps. It's kind of totally the opposite. And I still use the maps on the GPSRs in part because I'm used to those units that didn't have usable compasses. I mean, my 60 CSX was terrible. It was always, it had the actual compass in it, but it's not the 6-axis one that everyone's using now. It's, I want to say like 30 degrees off. So somehow I think the actual sensor slipped in the unit. It never calibrates right. It was always 30 degrees off. So yeah, I ended up just turning that off because it was completely useless.
Interesting. See, now I use the maps until I get, out of the car, basically, and then I switch to the compass. My compass is apparently my compass units have always been right. Who knew?
Well, in the chat, Nell says that he has the 64S and really likes it. He replaced his 60S when it finally died after 10 years of geocaching punishment and the exploding batteries that killed it.
Yikes.
Yeah. So,
and you see John is a brother of yours. He uses the Garmin eTrex 30X in conjunction with his phone, and he loves it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of endorsements live, but I don't have the 30X. I'd like a 30X because that one actually has the Bluetooth. But and that's one thing. If you have the Bluetooth on these Garmins, I'd recommend turning off the notifications because they're annoying. But for the other side of the active outdoor users, again, I'm going to go back to the Oregon 750T. If you like the touchscreen, this is going to give you that connection if you want it. You don't necessarily have to use it, but it, again, is the current top of the line of the Oregon series. And the T is going to add the topo maps. So it's a good solution for the active outdoor guy who wants, or girl, who wants the touchscreen and that kind of functionality.
Now, Daryl, geocachers, of course, love that Wi-Fi Bluetooth connectivity. But what would the outdoors person use it for? Would they? I mean, are we talking, can they upload trail maps? Can they upload...
Well, you can't upload the trail maps.
Waypoints?
My thought was more for when you're at home, when you're at your office, whatever, where you signed in, you can download your Pocket Query from there without needing a computer.
That's great for the geocachers, but what about your hikers, your hunters?
Well, if you're a hiker or hunter and you're not doing geocaching, then no, I would not recommend the 750 series because there's really nothing in there that makes it compelling over some of the other selections. The thing that makes it compelling is that wireless connectivity for the geocachers. It's the not needing a computer to load it up. And more often I'm talking with cachers who might have a computer, might not have a computer, but they never use it if they have it. They're always on their smartphone. Occasionally they'll pull out their tablet, but we're really becoming more and more dependent on the smartphone. And with the Wi-Fi, even if you don't have the smartphone, you don't need to have that computer. You can do your Pocket Queries, set them up from your tablet or from your smartphone or from your computer, but you don't have to load up your unit by connecting it to the computer. And that's where the disconnect is starting to really show now, is in the geocachers who don't have the computer to connect to their GPSR.
Or just simply don't use it to connect, yeah.
Exactly. Where
it's one thing not to have, it's another thing not to use.
Exactly. You know, how many people do you know who have that like Windows 7 PC that's their only PC at home now? That never gets turned on, so when they want to use it, they have to turn it on like the day before and let all the Windows updates run before they can actually use the computer.
Now, my Windows 7 machine doesn't stay on very often these days, but it doesn't take that long to boot up, and I've got it turned off, all the updates turned off, so I don't get nagged about Windows 10.
There you go.
See, that's a good idea.
I shouldn't tell you I just worked on somebody's Windows Vista computer. I'm like, okay, I've done all I can here. It's time to move on.
My Windows Vista computer is now a Debian Linux machine that I'm still working on for my son.
Yeah, just let it go. Well, the computer's fine. Let the operating system go.
Yeah, the operating system needs to go, though.
Yep.
So my best value picks are, again, both Garmin, and that's eTrex 20X, and that's because this is a good, solid performer with enough functionality to support most geocachers. You can load the maps on it. You can load caches on it. It's got all of that stuff that geocachers would want, just not as much of it. It doesn't have that compass. It doesn't have the barometric altimeter. Doesn't have as much of anything, but it has the basics in there. So for $200, this is a great unit to get started. It's a good unit to supplement, or as the spare whatever. It's going to be as good as the eTrex 30 as far as the performance of the GPS goes. So that's my, you save $100. It's my pick for the best value, even though I do prefer the 30, and I think it is worth that $100. Get started if $200 is all you can spend. Get started with this guy. If you can go a little bit more expensive, the GPS Map 64 doesn't have the functionality that the S does, and I would recommend the S over the 64. But again, if you're price limited but want something that's a little bit better, that's the base 64 model is still a great unit for the value-minded cacher. Especially if all you're looking for is that unit that's going to help you place caches and get better chords, maybe act as a backup, then save the money and get either the eTrex 20 or the 64. I think both are great values.
That's true. Now, for my pick for value, again, it's a Garmin. I'm going cheap. And it's so cheap, it's yellow. It's almost like a chick. That's the Garmin eTrex 10. You can still get those. It's not the old yellow Garmin, but it's the newer yellow Garmin.
Yeah, and it's a very capable unit that still has the USB now, so don't worry about the serial. Right. And it is still a good GPS. It's not as fast as like the 20, and it doesn't support the maps.
Right. So, I mean, it's $109. We've seen them, significantly less than that, and not on sale. So, if you're looking for something in the $70 range, that's a pretty good GPS to get you started, or to supplement the phone.
Well, and I think it also segues well into your next category, because it is something that's cheap and durable. It's good for the children.
Right. So the next category we're talking about is beginners or children. If you're just getting into geocaching, perhaps this is the first podcast you've listened to about geocaching, and we thank you. Or you have children that you don't want to give them your $600, $700, $800 smartphone and hope that the case really is as waterproof as it said on the packaging. So for that, I push towards the Exploris GC. That's this little guy right here. It's a good size GPS for the smaller hands. It's got buttons, so it works with gloves. Color screen. The kids don't feel like they're missing out on much. $150, and it holds a metric crap ton of geocaches.
10,000. Yeah, and it does come preloaded with some geocaches. But that's also not a Garmin unit. That's the Magellan unit.
That's a Magellan unit.
So this is a good point to talk about that differentiation. I went all Garmin because Garmin is really the only manufacturer now who's actively working on their handheld units. And unfortunately, I've been told by at least 3 different sources who aren't directly connected with Magellan, but do have some ties to them, that the Exploris line and all of their handheld units have been kind of shelved for now. They're just selling out what they have. They're not really actively working on it. And that makes me nervous. Plus, almost everyone that you talk with now who's a geocacher, if they have a GPS, it's a Garmin. And if you go to the geocaching events, the Garmins are the ones that are supported. You can usually find people who will work with the Magellans, but it's not as easy.
Right.
And it's been dwindling. It's gotten a little bit harder. So I really have a tough time recommending the Magellan units. That's not to say I don't like them. I think they are good units that never really got polished the way they should have been. And at this point, I'm not sure we're going to see the hardware updates, let alone the software updates.
Right. And if you don't get those hardware and software updates, the units are no longer competitive.
Exactly.
So it's a shame. I like the competition between companies. Garmin has always, in my opinion, produced the slightly better unit over a Magellan, or there are other companies and I've forgotten them now.
Well, Lorentz was the other big one that a lot of people liked.
Yeah.
And they're not really doing anything. And I have one of the Lorentz Enduras, and the thing drove me nuts. I could never actually get it to work right for geocaching. So I was never a Lorentz fan, but I know people who were mega Lorentz fans and wouldn't touch anything else. And those folks are so disappointed now.
Were they boaters?
No, actually, none of them were.
Interesting. That's always where I've heard of Lorentz.
Yeah.
Is in the marine.
I think didn't Cobra have some units also?
Cobra did, but as I understood it, theirs were actually like rebadged units from Garmin.
Okay.
And if you looked at the one that I actually got my hands on, if you looked at it, it looked and felt a lot like the E-Trex, but it was like a halfway point from the bottom of the line to the next level up, and was like right in there, and it was cheap. So they had some really good competitive units in that space, but never really seemed to take it very far. But Limax, one of the reasons we brought you on, and there's two big reasons, but one of them is that you are a Magellan fan. So why don't you tell us about your picks in the Magellan line?
Yeah, well, I will do that. Actually, my first pick was the same as Chris's last pick, which was the Explorers GC. That is actually the unit that got me back into geocaching back in 2011. I actually bought the unit in late 2010, and at that time, I was actually looking for a unit that would actually do, that would store geocaches on it. I figured at this point there had to be units that did that. Since before that, I was actually using a Garmin GPS 12 with the handspring visor and a cable connected between them using CacheMate, and which worked very well for 2004, 2005, 2006. But yeah, the GC got me back into it, and it's still a great unit. And the main reason I went with Magellan, they're less expensive than Garmin. And when I lost the GC, I left it at a geocache. I
That's
actually
what GC stood for anyway.
Yeah. I went out exploring for new units. My wife said, well, for Father's Day this year, you can have a new GPS unit, because she knew that I was enjoying geocaching again. And actually, I was going to get the Explorers 310, it's an orange unit, about the same specs as the GC, 10,000 geocaches. It could use 1,000 waypoints and had, a good amount of memory that was not expandable, but it was not a touch screen, which means that you could use it with gloves or whatever. The big drawback actually on that unit was the fact that you couldn't upload maps to it.
Well, we should note too that the GC is the same way. You can't upload maps, but it does have the worldwide base map. Right,
and it was actually a really good map in that unit. By a happy accident, I ended up with the Explorers 510, which has the touch screen. It does have expandable memory, and you can upload maps. And actually, I've got an uploaded topo map on my unit right now. It has a built-in camera, which was not something I thought that I would use, and I'm finding myself using it every so often, especially when I want to geotag something. But that one, it has a touch screen. It's a resistive touch as opposed to
resistive?
Yeah, resistive touch as opposed to reactive touch. Yeah.
Capacitive. Yeah.
Capacitive touch. Yeah. Which has its own drawbacks. I mean, half the time I'd be going down the road and, I'd have this thing dangling around my neck, and I hear click, 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 which means that maybe a button on my shirt or something like that is hitting the touch screen and causing all sorts of mayhem on it. I had to figure out how to lock the screen. And of course, they buried that deep within about 3 levels of menus, which of course is the perfect place for locking a screen.
Same with the Garmin. You can, on the Garmin 600 I have, you can lock the screen, but it takes more taps than to correct whatever errant screen you've jumped to.
Right.
So,
well, and real quick for people who aren't familiar with it, the capacitive touch screens are what you're used to on the smartphones, where it's just like a sheet of glass. It can register multiple finger presses usually, not always, but usually. But it has to have the fingers or the stylus that's built for it. The resistive touchscreen, it's usually like 2 layers, 1 layer of plastic over top of your screen, and it's measuring only 1 press where that top layer comes in contact with the layer below it. So the nice thing about that is you can use those with gloves.
Yeah, you can. It unfortunately, the problem I have sometimes is that with the unit, it does take a little while to really say, "Oh, were you really touching the screen?"
Yeah, it's not as responsive. You have that extra layer that takes away some of the clarity from the screen below it. And that's one of the big reasons that they're disappearing, but it's also not as durable as the capacitives tend to be.
Or as clear.
Right. Which goes back to the readability.
Which is why I bring a pair of reading glasses with me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does have not just the dimming effect, but it tends to have like a halo effect where it's blurring everything. So it does in every way make your screen less readable. All right, let's move on to the other reason that we really wanted you here today, which was you've been doing some research into the personal locator beacons or the GPS rescue unit type stuff. So what, that's the stuff that you're going to want to take with you when you're going like off grid. So if you do something stupid or get stuck in a situation that you shouldn't be, you have that little button to press to get some help.
Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of research into this. I've mentioned in chat rooms on other shows that a lot of the hiking I do by myself. I've gotten myself in a couple of sticky situations. Thankfully, nothing too terrible. Mostly it's running out of water. But there have been a couple of cases where I have slipped, and thankfully I was okay and able to keep going. But if I hadn't been, I don't know when somebody would have found me.
And we probably wouldn't have you on the show right now.
That would also be the case. Yeah. So, yeah, actually, I started thinking about it. I was going to go hiking up at Morgan Territory, which is just east of Mount Diablo. Nice big open area to do some hiking. And it turned out a couple of my Muggle friends wanted to find out more about geocaching. And so the 3 of us went. So we actually had the perfect size for going hiking. I mean, they say 3 is the minimum because then you keep 1 with the person who's injured and 1 to go for help. But in looking at this, and it really started dawning on me when I was talking with my dad's airplane group a little bit, talking a bit about the fact that some of the pilots do carry these rescue units also in case they get they have to make an emergency landing for some reason. They're nowhere near anything, and the radio goes out. So I've been looking at the units, and the 2 I'd been looking at the most are actually the Spot Gen 3 and then the DeLorme InReach series. And, they've each got their interesting things with them. And of course, their websites tout rescue stuff up one side, down the other. In fact, I know the Spot for sure. I don't remember if DeLorme has a running total of how many rescues they have. And looking at the units, the Spot Gen 3 is actually the more simple unit. It's only got 5 buttons total on it. There's 1 for roadside assistance, 1 for SOS, 1 for sending your coordinates right then, saying, yeah, here's where I am with a custom message. And then there's another one for, sending a custom message also. What's what I found with that one though is that you have with the unit. I mean, you have to pay for a service plan with it, in addition to the cost of it, which actually costs just about as much as the unit does. A year's worth of service is about $150 a year, or $15 a month, and even if you're paying monthly, you have to commit for a year, and that's basically for basic service. In addition to that, you've got a network fee that you have to pay on top of that. So that's one of those hidden costs that they have. And then, in order to really get good features on it, they've got what's called enhanced tracking, which means that they will send they will send your coordinates quicker every time. The thing is, it does keep on sending coordinates saying here's where I am, here's where I am. And if somebody looking at the website could actually see that, but by doing enhanced tracking, you can change the duration down to, say, even down to about 5 minutes for unlimited. And if you want to go extreme, which actually doubles your service cost, it will send the tracking every 2.5 minutes. Wow. And I can see where there might be some cases for that. I mean, for me, I was going to say, I mean, even sending it every, I can't remember what the basic service, how often it gets sent.
Well, if you think about it, if you're in a vehicle, a boat, a car, or an airplane, 2.5 minutes is, quite some distance to travel.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in an airplane.
I remember when they had come out with, I had the original Spot Messenger. Actually, do they call it the Messenger? I don't remember. But I had the original.
It was just the Spot, the orange one.
Spot, yeah. And I had the service for a year just to have it and play with it, and like the idea of it.
Yuppie rescue.
Yeah, well, and at the point we were talking about going on to some of the islands that are inaccessible, except by a ferry that only hits the island like once a day. And we have a few of those in the Great Lakes where, there's some very rare caches. But one of the other things that they had been doing, and this is, really before smartphones caught on, was the tracking, and you could embed it on a website, and a number of the people who were using it were like the cyclists doing the, cross-country tours, or the kayakers going, and one of them was someone who was kayaking in the Amazon. And it was, I think at the time, a 15-minute interval, which is a major time difference for any of those kind of folks. So they really needed something better, and they did have the better service, but I think it topped out at every 5 minutes. And even then, it was every 5 minutes the unit would send the update, but it might take still 5 minutes for it to post. So that's why, the 2.5 minutes, I think, is so much more important now. And I'm assuming the technology has gotten that much better. If you're doing something like that, you want that track, and it would actually, I think it still does, save the tracks so that you could download them later and post them to your blogs, or use it for
bragging rights.
Yeah, so it has the full track then, and you don't have to grab it off a unit. And there are no connections to these units.
That way you can actually prove you made the Kessel run in under 12 parsecs.
You know what? I don't think GPS works for that.
Oh. Now, I was... Limax, you mentioned that you can pay per month, but you still have to do a 12-month contract. Yes. I remember looking into these a while ago, and you could do, month by month, like, you know what, I'm not going out in the winter, so I'm not going to pay for October through February. I only want it in, these particular months.
Yeah, that's not what I got from looking at the website this time. But
so perhaps they've changed their plans.
Well, the Spot, I think, is annual. There are places that will rent you the device and the service. The DeLorme has the option, or had, and they could have gotten rid of it, because don't forget DeLorme is now part of Garmin, and they have been changing stuff around, as I understand. I haven't dug into it.
Well, their website still shows them as having a monthly service.
Okay. So some of that stuff may end up changing now that it's owned by Garmin, but I hope not, because that's one of the big sales advantage that the InReach has over the Spot, is you can buy the unit, keep it in the drawer, and then when you're planning on doing your big trip up, that mountain, or, kayaking through the rainforest, you activate it for that month, and you know that's it.
Yeah, the Pacific Crest Trail.
There you go. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. Those, in my opinion, that made it much more affordable, is be able to turn it on when you need it, or get the service when you need it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, we got into that discussion quite a bit at breakfast over that, and I was under the impression from what I was hearing from them that everything was yearly only. And when I dug a little bit deeper, yeah, the Spot actually is yearly only from what I could tell from looking at their website.
That's a shame.
Yeah. So yeah, and the other interesting thing that I found out is, in order to use the roadside assistance button, it's an extra $30 a year, even just to use that one button. Which I think I'm guessing that's so that they can make their contacts to whatever. So
right. And then do you have to pay for them to come out? Is it
I would assume so.
A service fee for them to come out, even though okay.
Yeah. Most
So
likely.
you're paying for the convenience of using the button.
Yeah. Yep. So moving on to the DeLorme units. Looking at there was two units. There was the SE and the Explorer, InReach SE and InReach Explorer. With the SE, it is actually in quite a lot of ways very similar to the Spot. It's a more expensive. It has it actually has a screen on it. I think it's a touch screen on it. And what's nice about that is you can connect these units, both of these, to your smartphone and use the, I've just forgotten the name of the app again, on DeLorme. Earthmate, yeah. You can use the Earthmate map on the unit then to connect back and forth. And I guess this is for the person who is afraid to not be away from social media for a very long time.
FOMO?
Yeah, FOMO. Because it's, part of it is the fact that you can do your email, you can do this kind of stuff, but it's going to be darn expensive. And, some of the reviews I was reading say it's also really darn slow. And I'm thinking, if you need to send a text to somebody saying, hey, I'm still out here, that'd be a good use for it. But I don't really want to use it for updating my Twitter feed with lols. So
exactly. I guess that would be fear of missing posts.
Yes.
Not fear of missing out, because you're talking to them. You're not getting it's a one-way conversation.
Yeah, so it's FOMP.
FOMP.
Well, the InReach does have the ability, though, to do the two-way messaging. Yeah. So it's great for that, talking with your base camp, which, let's face it, is our spouse in most cases, to make sure that, everything's okay. Or, hey, I want to go for this last cache. Do I have another, 90 minutes to spare? And no, you have to come home right now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and the different. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, come home now, or your dinner will be cold.
Well, and the other thing that I've heard people use this for is communicating back with the literal base camp. So, hey, I don't need emergency services or anything, but I'm not doing so well. Can someone come up and help me down? Or, hey, I've for hunters, I've got this deer that I need some help bringing back to camp.
Yeah, which is a nice unit with that one. Yeah, and actually, I think with the Spot, if you were to use the custom message for something like that too.
Sure, but you don't get the two-way communication that you do.
No, that is true. That's very true. Yeah. Now with the Explorer, the only difference I could really see between the SE and the Explorer, besides the fact that the Explorer costs almost $100 more, is that the Explorer also allows you to do navigation and waypoints. So theoretically, you can go geocaching with it.
So of all of these, this is the only unit that really fits into the GPSR picking for geocachers that we're talking about today, because this one could conceivably be used as a geocaching unit. Right. I don't know anyone who's done that, but it is, if you're looking for that supplement for, hey, my phone died, or, I want something a little bit better than, accuracy than the phone, then this might be a solution if you're more concerned about losing coverage and needing that either the two-way messaging or just a rescue feature.
Yeah, and so I could see, that could probably work a bit with that. It's I don't know if I'd want to actually pay the extra money just for that, just because I would actually rather have a dedicated unit for that.
Sure. Well, and this is assuming you're going to be doing it because you need that extra functionality.
Right.
So rather than carrying 3 units, like your smartphone, your GPS, and the inReach, now you could do conceivably, and we haven't talked with anyone who's done it, so you'd have to try it. But conceivably, you could carry just the Explorer or the inReach Explorer, and not necessarily need the GPSR.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. And then, my last 2, I actually, I found all these on REI's website, which is where I basically went. It's the only outdoor store closest to me. We've actually got a Bass Pro Shop, but it's kind of a ways away. These are both from ACR. There's the Rescue Link Plus and the Aqualink. Those are the ones that REI carries. ACR actually has quite a few more units than those. What I found very interesting about these, and Daryl, you and I were talking offline a little bit about this, these are very popular with mariners because these units do float. The interesting thing about these is there's no subscription required with either one of these. This is a unit used just for rescue, and you turn it on when you need to use it. Otherwise, it stays off. It seems to be, in both cases, they seem to be sealed units. With I think it's a 5-year battery life, and at the end of the life, you actually have to send it back to ACR to get the battery replaced. And there's a sticker on the back that says you need to send it back by this date, or else we can't be held responsible for what may happen. But what's interesting between the 2 units is, the Rescue Link Plus, from what I could tell, just has the just says, here's where I am. Mm-hmm. The Aqualink says, here's where I am. Who am I? So I there might be some good uses for that. I mean, it's the units themselves. Go ahead.
These are really interesting units. I took a look at them. Now, the Aqualink actually has a radio in it to communicate with, and it's what NATO and the military use for their rescue devices. So, I mean, it's military-grade hardware you're working with there.
Sure, and these are really designed more for that in case of emergency break glass situation. It's not going to do the tracking or any of that stuff. This is simply the rescue device. So it's the kind of thing that you might want to grab and throw in your backpack so that if you do fall down the hill or whatever, you have something, and it doesn't require you to be paying extra for it.
And there's no subscription.
Yeah.
That's important to know. It's more expensive up front because it's, better hardware, but there's no subscription. It's when you need it, it works.
And that, it would be basically how I would look at it. It's that, just in case thing. And going back to the Spot really quickly, I did notice there was a warning on their webpage. It says you do not have it within so many inches or feet of another GPSR. So I found that kind of interesting that there would actually be that kind of interaction between 2 GPSRs.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I mean, the inReach was originally sold as an add-on for the DeLorme.
Right. Well, if I understand correctly, it's not that the GPS is interfering, not that signals are interfering, but rather that the outbound signal is close enough that it has caused problems. And a lot of that trouble, remember we were talking about the Lightwave LTE stuff years ago. And that's because it's close to the same frequency, and GPS was not filtered as well as it should have been, and it still is not being filtered as well as it should have been or should be. So it's more susceptible to interference than it should be.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. They actually did list the frequency. I think it was 405 megahertz. Can't remember which unit that was that had it. It might have been the Rescue Link.
It was the Rescue Link at 406 megahertz.
400 off by 1 megahertz.
I know. At that point, it doesn't matter. But sorry, I had to do it.
Well, there are those hams out there that say 1 megahertz makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think we've given people a lot to think about. And if we've missed anything, if you have any of your own recommendations, we've got a randomized show coming up in a couple of weeks, which we'll talk about later. But send us in your feedback at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, or, of course, let us know through social media. And we also have the link on the website to actually send us a voicemail right from there, so you can do that as well. But Limax, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of the information about both the Magellans and those personal locator beacons.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Limax, it's always a pleasure. And, we have to give a little plug. Did you know Limax is one of our patrons? You too could become a patron, and we thank all of our patrons. You guys make the show possible. You notice there are no commercials. There are no ads. That's because of our wonderful patrons. So thank you so much. If you want to know more, head on over to the website, click on that Patreon link, and that'll lead you through everything you need to know.
And we've got some great shows coming up. Next week is going to be our virtual caching bag. And we're talking about the apps, the websites, the stuff that you have in that virtual caching bag, the stuff that you need to get the caches found. And this is really interesting, Chris. I put out a post today on our social media, Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. For the first time ever, we got the most feedback from Facebook, and we got a little bit from Twitter. We got nothing on Google+.
Google Plus isn't dead, folks.
I was going to say, I don't think I even saw it on Google+, but I wasn't on very much today.
So I think the Google Plus has died. If we'll see what it's like, but yeah. And now everyone who's sending us stuff so far, it's all been the actual geocaching apps. But we're looking for some of that other stuff. What are those cool apps that you're using other than the actual caching apps? Are you using something like a tool to decode your ciphers? The notebook apps that you really find useful, stuff to maybe. Yep. Locate the new cache location. That's the kind of stuff that's really cool to find out what you're using. So let us know. Again, email us at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com. Let us know through social media, or, of course, use that link on the website, because we love hearing all of this stuff in your own voice. And I mentioned November 3rd is going to be our next randomized show, Randomize Li, L-I. So that's a great location to drop all of that stuff that doesn't necessarily fit into any other show, including all the feedback from the last several shows. So
we ought to have Nick from Cashly on November 3rd.
Well, it's L-I, not L-Y.
Cashly, Randomize Li. You see where we're going.
Yeah, exactly. But in any case, that's going to be another great show to drop all that stuff in. And it's always a great show to come and join us live. Plus, if you're a patron, we're going to have that bonus show right afterward. Then November 10th is going to be getting good chords once again, and we're going to be talking not just about how to get the good chords, but also a little bit about the technology, I shouldn't say technology, but about the location system and how that stuff works and why it's not always the same. Then on the 17th, Jennifer of Team AJK returns to talk about ciphers. So learn more about getting into the cipher and how to actually decode those on the 17th for episode 255.
So we've got an episode on how to get good coordinates, and then the next episode is how to obfuscate the coordinates so nobody else can find them. Gotcha. See, we cover all aspects here. But folks, make sure you check the website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support these Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2016 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Bye.